IVM.
Hey everybody, quick request once again, if you could help us out by filling out our survey. It's at ivmpodcast.com/survey. This really helps us talk to advertisers about the kinds of people listening to these shows. Really do appreciate your help, and we're going to be doing a random drawing, and we'll be sending out some IVM swag. Hope you enjoy that.
Hello, welcome and Khush Amadid. You're listening to The Note with me, Mahrukh Inayet. It has been 13 years since the former Prime Minister of Pakistan, Benazir Bhutto, was assassinated while she was on an election rally. There's a fascinating account, and fascinating according to me because the circumstances under which I met Benazir Bhutto, the year of her assassination, are quite remarkable for a young journalist at that point. That was me. It was September of 2007, and Nawaz Sharif, another former Prime Minister of Pakistan, was ending his self-exile in London and returning to Pakistan. I was a news editor with Times Now, and my editor-in-chief, Arnab Goswami, told me that I would have to go to Dubai to try and get a reaction from Benazir Bhutto because we were planning a multi-country coverage of Nawaz Sharif's return to Pakistan. Back in those days, there was unimaginable interest in what was going on in Pakistan because it directly impacted India. I thought the opportunity was fantastic. I didn't do much prep. I just thought that I'm going to land in Dubai and go to her residence or her office if she had one there and plonk myself there and wait for her and maybe get a reaction from her. That was my great plan. I tried to find out if there were any numbers of her secretaries and so on, but I couldn't get one till I landed in Dubai. In those days, Reuters, which is a news agency and which was in partnership with Times Now at that point, had an office in Dubai, and I went and met the local editor, the bureau chief there, and to try and figure out how I could get this interview with Benazir Bhutto. And she told me that it's next to impossible because most of her interviews are planned by her secretary who's in Pakistan, and she's not giving any interviews to begin with. And secondly, it's going to take 10 to 15 days. Now, my timeline was 3 days. I had been sent literally for 3 days to try and get Benazir Bhutto's reaction. And when I was there, when I heard this, I realized the Herculean task that was in front of me, and I had been so excited at the prospect of meeting her that I simply did not think of how I was going to get this done. That's lesson number one, journalism for dummies, I'm guessing. So I said, what am I going to do? And thanks to my friend Vishal, who got me the number of Fahim Sahab, who was the person in Pakistan who was probably the only entity who could get Benazir Bhutto's interview or give me a time slot for the interview. So I called him again in my best chaste Urdu as I could. I told him, Janab, mujhe interview chahiye Benazir Bhutto sahiba ka. And he said, absolutely not, bilkul nahi. 10 din tak to aapko koi aise interview nahi mil sakta. You have to give context, you have to send me an email, we'll think about it. Pretty much dashing all my hopes. And I knew that this is a long drawn out process and it's not going to happen. So I said, okay, next thing, I'm going to stake out outside her house. Now, Benazir Bhutto used to live in one of the most high-profile areas in Dubai, this area called Emerald Isles, which was a gated community, obviously CCTV cameras everywhere. And here I am, almost like a rookie journalist, trying to do a stakeout outside her house. And I stood there and I said, okay, if I'm not going to be able to go out, I asked her gatekeeper, can I go in? They said, absolutely not. There was invisible security around her house is what I'm assuming. And then I decided to do a piece to camera outside her house. And as I was doing that piece to camera, these guys, the watchmen or the security guards with lathis in their hand, came after me and chased my videographer and me out of there. And I was just completely heartbroken. This was day 2, and I said, this is not going to work out. And I spoke to my editor and I said, boss, I think this is not working out and I'm not going to get her reaction. His response was, your job is on the line. You make sure that you get Benazir's reaction for me. And thereon piled up the pressure. I didn't know how to do this. So out of desperation, I had her local number, which I had got from my source. So I kept calling her local number, and there was this lady that kept answering and saying, Ms. Bhutto is not home. Then after some time, after a gap of an hour, I decided to, this was day 2 of my being in Dubai, and I had another day, and then I had to leave back for India. So the second day, I called up that landline number again. The same lady answered. And I changed my voice and I said, is Benazir there? And the lady said, no, she's not at home. And she asked who's calling. And the first name that came to me was my mother's, Shireen. So I said, this is Shireen calling, and tell Benazir to call me back. And I gave my number, my local number, which was my Dubai number at that time. So she said, all right. And then I said, this is also not going to work. And then I just decided to go out to the only thing that one does in Dubai, which is I said, at least let me do some retail therapy because nothing else seems to be working. So I went to the mall and I was walking around with my camera person with me. And suddenly the phone rang. So I picked up and there was this lady on the other side and she said, hello, Shireen. I'd completely forgotten about the phone call I had made earlier in the day. So I said, no, this is Shireen's daughter, Mahrukh, because I'm thinking the lady is asking for my mother. And the lady, the voice on the other side said, well, the Shireen I know doesn't have a daughter by that name. And it suddenly hit me that this was Benazir Bhutto's voice. And I said, is that Ms. Bhutto? She said, yes, who is this? And I gave my whole sob story and I said, my name is Mahrukh and I'm here. I've been asked to take your interview and I'm desperate. And I called and I just gave my mother's name because I didn't know what else to do. And she said, you know, Mahrukh, I love your ingenuity. Why don't you come tomorrow and I will give you an interview? And I remember that moment I started jumping up and down in the middle of that mall because I just couldn't believe what had happened to me. Went back to the hotel. I called up Arnab. I told him. He was ecstatic. They got all the, you had to book a satellite feed to ensure that the interview comes into India at the right time. I was only, I had one camera unit with me, but we made sure that we had 2 cameras just to make sure that it looked even grander. And I was nervous the whole night. I barely slept. And next day, promptly at 9:15, she'd called me at 9 o'clock. I was there at her residence. And this time the security guards looked at me and they allowed me in. And I remember as I was walking in, a very young teenager, Bilawal, was there. And I walked past him and I went in. I sat down and I told my camera persons to set up the entire setup for the interview. And as I'm sitting there, she walked down wearing this black cape and looking absolutely resplendent. And I introduced myself and she said, you are very naughty, I must say. So I said, thank you so much for giving me the time. And she said, what are these cameras doing here? So I said, it is a TV interview. She said, no. I thought this is going to be a print interview. I've been told categorically that I cannot give television interviews. And my heart just sank. I said, this is going to be a disaster. Probably she saw my face completely broken and she said, okay, Mahrukh, I'm going to allow you this one more concession. Quickly, let's do this interview because I have to go for my visa. And she had an interview at the visa office. So we sat down and the interview lasted for about 12 minutes, but she was so gracious. And when I saw my questions and the way I was asking, I looked like a child taking that interview, but her graciousness was tremendous. And even now when I think of it, it gets me that she was so kind to, allow this rookie journalist to take her interview. But the story doesn't end there. This was in September, and by December, Benazir Bhutto was also planning her return to Pakistan. I remember I was in the newsroom on 27 December, and around 6 p.m., which was the bulletin I was anchoring that day, I was going into the studio when I saw some news coming from one of the Pakistani feeds, and it said there had been an explosion. I read it in Urdu as one of their breaking news stickers, which said that there had been an explosion at a Benazir Bhutto rally. So I told my team, I said, we're going to focus on that. So I started the bulletin, and within 5 minutes, the news came that she had been assassinated. And for me, the images of what had transpired earlier in the year just came flashing back. And I sent a silent prayer for Benazir Bhutto, for the remarkable woman that she was. I know that politically she made way too many mistakes, but just as a gracious woman who took time out for a young journalist is something I will never forget. If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are @IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram. And if you want to reach out to me, I'm Mahrukh Inayet on Twitter and Mahrukh Inayet on Instagram as well.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. One more reminder, people, please go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and help us out. It will take you a couple of minutes to fill out this survey, but it really is very, very helpful for us. For the people who do fill out the survey and are willing to drop us their email address, we're going to do a special drawing and send out some IVM swag to everybody. So please do help us out with that. But what a week it's been on the network. There's so many things to talk to you all about. Let me run through some of the biggest highlights really, really quickly, right? So Sanjay Jha was on Cyrus Says. What an incredible conversation. I mean, I can't say enough about it. Check that out. We had Hansal Mehta on Mahrukh Inayet's The Note, talking about 1992 scam. Amazing stuff. We had Vishal Gondal talking to Nikhil Advani about his career in film. On Storytellers and Storysellers, Vineet spoke to Gunjan Arya, the CEO of OML, and Samiksha Unyal from Bacardi about the history of NH7, the Weekender Festival. On Postcards from Nowhere, Utsav had an amazing episode about the Bushmen of Kalahari. Begin the Journey, Ashish Vidyarthi talks about career choices. On Nankari, they talk about cake. What a fun show that was. And on This Round Is On Me, we had Dr. Sanjay Arora talking to Gauri about Suburban Diagnostics and Company and what he sees as the future of healthcare in India. And for our Tamil speakers, if you haven't been checking out Sivakami and Sabatam, why haven't you? Please do go check that out. Kavita's doing an amazing job telling that story. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
जिंदगी डायरीज के पन्नों में कुछ पुरानी यादें, समुंदर किनारे झूमते दरख्त, जवान दिल की धड़कनें और अनजान मुलाकातें हैं। तो आइए खोलिए मेरे साथ जिंदगी डायरी के पन्ने और साथ ही खुलकर जीते हैं जिंदगी। आप सुन सकते हैं जिंदगी डायरीज IVM पॉडकास्ट ऐप या वेबसाइट पर, या जहां कहीं से भी आप अपने पॉडकास्ट सुनते हो।